Welcome to another episode of Courageous Me. And we've got a really special guest on today. Her name is Adele Andrews. She's director and mortgage broker at Australian Property Home Loans. But she's also just done some refinancing for my husband and I. So not only do I know how amazing she is because of just what I've seen, I've experienced what it feels like to be one of her clients. And can I say, having had 30 years in financial services and worked with a lot of mortgage brokers, a lot of financial advisors over the years, this is one courageous woman. She made me feel so loved and so safe, yet she was like a bulldog with our numbers. And oh my God, got us a result that we most would have put in the impossible basket. But this is her. So I want to know, and I'm assuming you are all going to be excited by what we learn about what makes this amazing woman so amazing. So Adele, before we get into the nitty-gritty and find out about you, could you just share what excites you to have a conversation with me today about courage?
Yeah, sure. And I think, firstly, thank you very much for your very kind introduction. It was an absolute treat working with you guys on that process. Courage. I think once you find courage, your possibilities are endless. And I think it's once you dig deep into those things that on the surface may scare you, life-changing things can happen. So courage is a big thing that I love trying to tap into. And I know from my past experiences that when I have overcome those fears, that big things have happened.
Yeah, and I really love that too, because sometimes we all think of courage as the big stuff, but sometimes it's not actually the big stuff, but it's life-changing, really life-changing. So on that note, can you just give us a snippet as to who you are and what you do, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the first big question with you.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Adele. I am director and mortgage broker of my business, Australian Property Home Loans. I am also a mother to a 13 and 10-year-old, wife, horse rider, horse enthusiast, gym enthusiast, and I guess just like many other ladies out there trying to pack a million things into one day.
Yeah, I haven't ever heard a woman yet that hasn't said that. So, or hasn't got a whole list of stuff on there to do. Okay, so Adele, when is a moment, and again, I don't care how far back you've got to go, but when is a moment that you can recall you really had to reach in and find some courage in your life?
Look, there's been several. I think the first one that comes to mind, or one of the most poignant ones that I guess really shaped who I am today would have been about 17 years ago when I made the decision to move to Hong Kong. I'd actually just gone through a divorce, and I had found that I had changed quite significantly as a person as a result of that. And because of those changes, people still had me in a box of who I was, but not necessarily who I felt that I now was. And for whatever reason, I just felt that I wanted to get out of Australia, out of my day-to-day as I knew it. And so I decided to go to Hong Kong. I knew no one there. I had no job. I had no foundations there whatsoever. I just thought that it was a pretty cool market, and why not? So at the time I was working in recruitment, and explored options with Hudson, the company I was working with at the time, and I packed up for 3 days and went on 12 interviews in those 3 days to try and find something, and was fortunate enough to have a few offers, and then just the one at Hudson ended up being the best offer. So I moved across, I think it was about 3 weeks after that.
Oh, wow. So how old were you when all this happened?
It was 2008, so I was 34.
34. Wow. Why Hong Kong?
I don't really know. I think because it had a reputation for being exciting, great for business. I had been there once in the late or early 90s and remembered that it was, again, a pretty cool market. It did have a reputation for people who'd been over there and experienced that expat lifestyle. Everyone had an exciting tale to tell, and I was looking for a bit of excitement. I was looking for something that was completely different. I didn't necessarily want to go as far as London, because that was also on my radar, and it just sort of felt like the compromise without having to go so far. So that was the decision.
Yes. I ended up in London, and it is a long way, albeit wonderful. So can I ask, You said that after the divorce, that who everyone else thought you were, the identity that you had, but who you felt you were because you've changed as a result of the divorce. Can you talk about the difference? Like what were people thinking, or what identity did you have versus what now was coming through for you?
I think it was, I had a lot of self-reflection in that time. And there were a lot of traits about myself that I didn't like, and some things that I really needed to work on to, I think, improve how I was, and if I was to have another relationship, to ensure that the next one was going to be successful, or at least
Mhm.
try. And um, look, I can't really put my finger on exactly what it was that people thought that I was or who I was, but I just needed to draw a line in the sand and just have some sort of finality as to who Adele was pre 2008, and then have that time away from everyone, and then come back as a result of whether it be new life experiences or new learnings or new growth or whatever. But I think it was just more metaphorically just putting a line in the sand so that I did have that ability to, when I did want to return, come back as a new person, and people may have, I guess, lost those preconceived ideas of who and what I was.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you could actually set up a whole new identity without having left the shores, right? So it's interesting that you wanted to leave the shores to do
Yeah,
that.
look, yes and no. I think, um, I mean, I guess so, but I think you almost have to leave that environment too, so that you can grow. If you feel like there's things that you want to change about yourself, but your environment is, constricting that growth, you've just got to get away. And it took a bloody lot of courage. I literally packed up with my bags with a one-way ticket, going to a job working in a market that culturally was so different to Australia.
Yeah.
Did not know a soul there. Just sort of hoped that I would get involved somehow with the expat community there. And I guess there's no better way to throw yourself into it. And there was some, really, really tough times too, really tough times. But that's where growth happens.
Oh, it does. And that's what I find interesting. I've had quite a number of guests on that have done that. And yet there's others that say just move to a different suburb. Do you know what I mean? Like, yes, they've changed their environment, but they've still done it in Australia, whereas you've literally gone offshore and not knowing a single soul. So, yes, that certainly takes courage. What were the hardest things about doing that, do you think?
Oh, well, I think initially the loneliness.
Yeah.
You make friends, but it's, and particularly a market like Hong Kong, as fun as it is, it's very transient. And to get, it takes time to build those meaningful relationships with people. And I met some great people there, many of whom I'm still in contact with. In fact, a few of them are now my clients. um, I found that it lacked a bit of soul. And a lot of it was, there was a lot of people just over there in Hong Kong for what they could get out of it, which 9 times out of 10 was career growth, going up the ladder, or money, and not necessarily anything meaningful. So I don't know whether it's because I'm a Cancerian, a little bit more of a homebody, and I don't know what it was, but I maybe sensitive. I found that hard. Building, I not only went into a new job, but I was also given a desk that was completely cold that I had to build from nothing. So really having to build that up into something successful was very, very challenging. There was nothing easy about any of it, to be honest. But I stuck on. And then of course I got there, and then it was I was there for a month, and then the GFC came into play. So it was a very, very tough time, even from an employment perspective and a
Mm.
business perspective in Hong Kong. Sort of went from bathing in Bollinger to tumbleweeds down Lang Kwai Fong. It was everyone, and I worked in recruitment. So instead of everybody hiring by the hundreds, they were literally letting people go by the hundreds. So it was a very testing time in a number of aspects.
Yeah, and so beautiful, isn't it, though, to go off and experience all of that. You obviously survived because you're here telling the tale, and I'm assuming that you did well and got through it all. And how long did you actually stay there for?
So I was there for just over a year, and the only reason for that was, but I came back in that following February, and while I was back, I met someone who is now my husband.
Oh God.
And then decided that, okay, well, there's not much point in going back to Hong Kong. I may as well move back to Melbourne. So resigned and came back.
Oh, so you only came back for just a stint.
Yeah, well, my grandmother had passed, so I came back for her funeral, and then I was out one night while I was here and ran into, yes, my now husband.
Oh, I love that. Nothing like meeting a guy to get you to, yeah, come
Yeah.
back from your dream. Do you feel that you cut your time in Hong Kong short, or did it just feel right?
Yeah, not really. I didn't love it enough.
Okay.
I didn't like, whilst it was great experience, it was really tough and I didn't love it. So I wasn't necessarily missing out on much by coming home and I had nothing to lose.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And so, as a little girl, were you someone that sought adventure or challenge or growth? Like, does any of that kind of ring a bell from when you were growing up?
I was always at school, I was always very studious. So
Yes.
I was an academic student from year 7 to 9. I was always high grades in primary school. As I said, I've just gone back to riding horses again. As a youngster, I used to ride competitively, but not just at the local shows. It was at national level, and so I've never really done anything by halves. So in terms of, yeah, I mean, I guess that would be signs of
Yeah.
loving growth.
Yeah. And high achiever, high performer, all of that. Talk to me about the horse riding. When did you take that up?
So I started when I was about 4
Yeah.
and just started knocking around the paddocks on a little Shetland pony and just, I absolutely loved it. And then Mum made the mistake of taking me to a horse show one day and then it just sort of grew very, very quickly from there. So I had a number of horses and a number of wonderful experiences, and it was very much my life from 4 till 21. I did it, as I said, at quite a high level, and
Yeah.
that meant going to school, coming home, and then straight onto the horses and practicing and coaching. And the weekends were always filled with competing, and I absolutely loved it. And I have no doubt that a lot of the discipline and routine and regiment that was associated with what I had to do in that sport is now applied to many aspects of my life, including running my business.
Yeah, well, I can definitely see that having been a client of yours, like just your process and your follow up, the diligence around it was next level, like seriously next level. And I remember the whole way through it, Adele thinking, I would never want to be a mortgage broker after what I just experienced. You were just so good. Um,
Well, there's people like me that love doing it then in that case.
we are blessed. This world is blessed as a result of people like you. Talk to me, why did you give up horse riding at 21?
Oh, because I got to 21 and I thought perhaps I should start discovering boys because I hadn't explored anything in life outside of riding horses and being 100% committed to that. So it got to the stage that I thought, yeah, I just needed other things in life. So it was just time. I just needed to discover, doing other things with work. I had just also, I was close to finishing my degree at RMIT. And I had just secured an opportunity with EY as well. So that was going to be a commitment in itself. So to go into a profession like that and do what I was doing was just going to become more and more of a challenge. So yeah, it was just time to start focusing a bit more on life.
Oh, yeah, totally get that. What did you study at uni?
Accounting.
Accounting. Why did you do accounting?
I think it was one of those things where I left high school and I got, good marks in accounting and all the business subjects. And whilst I wasn't that sure of what I wanted to do, I knew that by doing some sort of a business degree, it was always going to serve me well, no matter what I went into. So, and accounting came relatively easy to me. And so, yeah, that was the field and the path that I chose.
Oh, how interesting. I have to just share this, right? So I did economics. That was my degree. And my best subject was actually economic statistics, right? So love numbers. Accounting, I could not get my head around. And I literally got 52 and 53 because you had to do it first semester and second semester. I only just got through. And even to this day, even though numbers are my thing, accounting and we are not on the same page. So that's why I was curious about why accounting. And now, did you become an accountant?
I did. So yes, I was ended up with EY for nearly 3 years, and then I worked with what was known as Cadbury Schweppes back then, and I worked for them for nearly 3 years. But then I kind of got sick of the numbers and realized that I missed people. I really wanted to work more with people, and I was, I was working in probably one of the coolest parts of accounting too. It was business advisory, so I was getting to look at these small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and learning about what was going on, and what was driving their profits or their growth or whatever. But I just missed more people work. So I actually went to a recruitment agency and I said, look, I don't really know what I want to do at the moment, but I'd like to just temp in accounting until I work out what is next. And the lady said to me, have you ever thought about recruitment? And I said, well, no, I don't have any experience in HR or anything like that. And she said, well, I'll offer you a job today if you'll take it. So
what did she see in you? Like, you're in there saying you want to temp in accounting, you want to do something more people related. She's basically said you could get into recruitment and here's a job. What was it? What do you think shone through where it made her want to offer you on the spot?
I think, I don't know, maybe my sense of confidence. Maybe she felt that I would relate to people well. I mean, I don't know. You just have to ask her, but I was very grateful for the opportunity, and I ended up working in accounting for nearly in recruitment for nearly 20 years. So, and I think since doing that and now having worked in mortgage broking, I think what I've discovered about myself is that I just love helping people achieve life-changing events. So getting a job is very similar to buying a home. It changes your life. And the emotion that's associated with going for an interview and going for a job and finding out if you've got that job is very similar to applying for a home loan, finding out if you've been approved and buying a home. It's a very, very similar journey. And having that experience and that grounding in recruitment and understanding people do sit by the phone. They want an update. And, and I put myself in that position too. And it's, I need to know where I stand. It's the same thing with a home loan. You can't let a day or two pass and leave your client there. Like, you want to know. And even if there's nothing to be told or nothing to be conveyed, nothing from the bank yet, but, I'll be pushing them. So it's a very, very similar journey. And I get a massive kick out of that. That approval email never, ever gets old. That conversation with the client afterwards never, ever gets old. And, when they settle on that property and they've achieved that goal, again, it never gets old. And being part of that journey just helps to forge such strong relationships with your clients that are long-term and ongoing. And it doesn't just stop at that settlement. It's do we want to then buy the next investment property? We need to make sure that your rate is as competitive as possible. Things like that. It's never ending.
Yeah, totally. And like I said, again, having been on the other end of you and your work, I never ever for one moment didn't feel like you had it all under control. Not once. And that is a skill. Like, that is really beautiful, and you bring that to the table. Like, it shines through. So you mentioned when you were at that recruitment agency saying, you don't want to be in accounting anymore, that what probably shone through was your level of confidence. Have you always been confident?
Probably in a business sense, yes. Personally, probably not. But in a business sense, yes.
Why personally not? Personally.
I guess it probably stems back to, like, I was never really necessarily the popular girl at school. There was never that. I mean, you kind of get pegged at a certain age, don't you, as to where you fit in society. And if you're not in that sort of cool sector as from a school age, then I think there's probably a little bit of a legacy that you carry through with that. I had an element of confidence as a result of my horse riding and the success that I'd had from that. But I think it's hard to explain why not. But but I think more so from an academic and a school and a business sense, but not necessarily as a personal sense.
And it's interesting just asking this question, knowing what I know of you. Like, you come across as so confident. Now, I obviously know you in a business sense, but I've had moments of, experiencing you outside of work as well. And there's just a beautiful confidence that comes out through you naturally. However, as a lot of us do, we can also put that on. Now, I'm not saying you are, but there's a lot of people that do. That's just not something I would have. You don't think that when you see someone who looks as confident as you, that they could still be experiencing it. So, just you mentioned too about the horse riding, and that probably helped with a lot of the confidence. You do it now. When did you get back into it and why?
Oh, about 12 months ago. Oh,
Oh,
no, it'll be 18 months ago now. And look, I got back into it. I sort of fell back into it. So we had a racehorse that we had been racing, and I think when you're brought up with horses and you've shown horses and you're in that industry, or you start off in that industry, you never lose the appreciation for a beautiful horse.
Yeah.
So, I go to the races, everyone goes to win money. I go to look at the beautiful thoroughbreds. It's just a different level of appreciation. And this particular boy we had imported from England, we raced him. And I just fell in love with him. We'd had a number of horses, but for whatever reason, I just fell in love with this boy. And I always said to my husband, when he retires, I'm keeping him. And so, yes, exactly.
It's debatable whether you'll keep the husband or not.
Exactly. So anyway, we raced him for 3 years, and then we ended up retiring. And they said, "Okay, he's yours." I thought, "Oh gosh, what am I going to do with this horse now?" It's a bit like being given a baby. Like, what am I going to do with him? So my coach, who coached me when I was young, is still very heavily in the show world. So I thought, well, I'll give him to him. He can get him going. He can show him. I'll fund it. I'll keep him just so that I can watch him, but he can do all the work. And he had him for about 3 weeks, and I said, I'd love to come down and see him. So I went down, and he said, well, why don't you get on him? And I said, look, I haven't ridden in 15 years or 20 years, as you know, and he raced 4 months ago, so no. And he said, look, I'm telling you, trust me, he's quiet, just get on him. So anyway, I did, and cutting a very long story short, I ended up going down there again a fortnight later for another ride, and then again and again. And then he said, look, why don't you just do this? Why don't you just take it on? And again, it's a big time commitment, and I don't like doing anything by halves, as we've already established. So I said, look, I don't know if I'll have time, but let's see. Anyway, fast forward, end up riding 3 or 4 times a week. We then go to our first show, he gets champion. We go to our next show, we get champion. We end up at all the Royal shows. We won at Adelaide show. We got 3rd at Melbourne show. We won at Canberra Royal show. So he's had a very successful trajectory in the last 12 months, and I'm well and truly on the hook again now.
Oh, man. And how did that fuel you as someone who likes the achievement piece? Like,
oh, it's terrific. It's absolutely terrific. I never went in with any expectations of, well, A, I didn't think that I would start showing again. B, I certainly didn't think that I'd be winning at any shows again. And I had never entertained the idea of a Royal show. So to have wins at 3 Australian Royal shows was incredibly exciting, and just a lovely journey to go on with the horse too. That partnership and the mateship that we've got now. I'm in a position now I could never sell him because he's really my 3rd child.
Well, yeah, that's right, absolutely. What's his name? Can I ask?
Benjamin.
Oh, cute. How old's Benjamin?
He will be 9 in February.
9. Oh, sweet. He's like a child. And when you did the first show, so it's been 20 odd years since you've shown. So in terms of coming from, such achievement to now doing your first one 20 years later, how did that feel?
Oh gosh, it was very overwhelming. To be honest, it felt like a bit of a blur in the morning because, getting there, getting ready, and I'd forgotten my craft to a certain point. And, I could hear my coach out there going, faster, faster, you're not pushing him forward enough. And I'm thinking, God, I don't even know what I'm meant to do anymore. And it was very overwhelming. It was a lot. Somewhat exciting, but very nerve-wracking. Again, courage, a lot of courage.
That is courage.
And then look, it was just so incredibly rewarding at the end of the day. So such a great feeling that, and a lot of work had gone into going into that day too. I talk about all the fun parts, but there are a lot of weeks there where there were a lot of tears and a lot of frustrations, and I can't do this anymore. I can't ride properly anymore. I can't get him going properly. And to my coach's credit, he just kept saying, just stay in the saddle. It's time in the saddle. That's the only thing you need. And he just wouldn't let me give up, and I'm very grateful that he didn't.
What a metaphor for life, though, hey?
Absolutely.
I mean, seriously, time in the saddle.
Totally.
And someone believing in you.
Yeah.
That you can do this when you were doubting it. It's been 20 years since you were kind of at the peak of showing and jumping what you were doing. And here you are going back to not a beginner, but you're starting again with all those insecurities. But the coach just kept saying, no, keep going, keep going.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there's a lot we can take out of that, and it's the same with running a business, right? Just stay in the saddle.
Yeah, totally. And so I'm jumping around here, but there's so many things I want to unpack with you. So I know you're not in recruitment anymore, right? Because we've talked about your business as a mortgage broker. How did that happen?
So we came back from Singapore in 2017, and at the time I had...
You and your husband?
Yes. So, the whole family. So we had the kids over. We got married in Singapore. We had the 2 children in Singapore. We'd been over there for 9 years. So that was another jump moment, wasn't it?
Yeah. Why Singapore? Tell me about that.
Okay, so I had just come back from Hong Kong, met said husband. I was back for 6 months, and then he ended up getting a job in Singapore.
Of course.
And at that time again, it was another one of those, and we weren't serious, but I thought, well, I've got to see this out to the end. And I hadn't really planted any roots in Melbourne because I had only been back from Hong Kong for 6 months. And, he was saying, come. And I thought, you know what? Again, I've got nothing to lose. So I ended up going. It would have been about 4 months after he had moved over there, and I went for a number of interviews over there. And again, I'm a big believer in fate and whatever. And I had one interview with MasterCard, and they offered me a 12-month contract in recruitment for them. And then I thought, you know what, 12 months is perfect because it'll give me enough time to suss out this guy. It'll give me some overseas experience. I'll have a job. And so I took it. And I ended up working for MasterCard for 9 years. They were just the most amazing company, and I started in a contract recruitment role, but they gave me so many opportunities. I ended up working on China projects. I ended up working on company integrations, a lot of initiatives around hiring women and growing the business and growing the team. And when I left, I was the head of recruitment, and I managed 17 countries and 13 staff, and it was a terrific trajectory. But when I came back to Australia, they let me keep the job, even though it was technically run out of Singapore. They said, look, we understand you're going, we'll keep you in that role, you just run it out of Australia. It was just too hard. I had to go to Japan or China or whatever at a drop of a hat, which I could do in Singapore because I had domestic help. But when I got to Australia, it was like, well, who's going to look after my children? So, and it was time. I was doing a lot of calls in the middle of the night, which again were time zone friendly in Singapore, but not in Australia. And it was just time. So left MasterCard, thought I'm going to take a year off, got 6 months into it and thought, there is no way I can do this. I need to do something. So when we were in Singapore, my husband was selling Australian properties off the plan. We had devised a business over there together. I was helping him on the weekends run that business. And about 3 years before we moved over, I identified, well, you need a finance business to help the investors buying these properties settle on what they're buying. So that was kind of a little side hustle, through lack of a better word, that I had when I was in Singapore while I was also at MasterCard, and I oversaw that business. So when I moved back to Australia, and I did explore recruitment opportunities when I got home, but I just couldn't find anything meaty enough that was comparative to what I had been experiencing in that role at MasterCard. So kind of packed away that idea, and then I thought, well, maybe I'll try this finance thing. And so I had, I guess the framework of the business that I had established in Singapore, catering to non-resident investors. And And so I went and got my certificate and my diploma and all those things in my late 40s. So I'm proof that you can teach an old dog new tricks. And then I just sort of threw myself into it, and that took a lot of courage because for the first, I'm going to say the first probably 2 years of that, I'd gone from being, a fairly successful heavy hitter in my field to suddenly nothing. You're kind of, you've got no income coming in. You've got to build this thing from scratch. You've got no referral partners. It was very, very grassroots. And I just thought, God, why would I do this? Like, maybe I'm better off just going back to recruitment. And anyway, look, I didn't. I guess my first real kick along was I found a guy that was selling house and land packages, and he said, I'll give you a go as a mortgage broker. And I just got deals done. I got very, very tough deals done that he was not having any luck with other brokers. But I guess because I was new and wanted to prove myself, and I don't take no for an answer. Even now, give me a tough deal, I won't take no for an answer.
Yep, I'm testament to that.
I just got them done. And to this day, he still refers me deals. He knows my appetite for those sorts of deals is a little less to what it was back then. But and he gave me, a real foot in the door. So, and it just built from there. And even now, I'm close to 90% of my business comes from my existing clients. It's all referrals, and I do have a number of referral partners, but it's predominantly all from my current clients. So, and it's been again a very, very tough journey, and it has been another one of those just stay in the saddle sort of moments. But I'm going to say it's, after probably 2 or 3 years, that's when it really started motoring along, and now it's really swinging beautifully. And I've just put on my first staff member. I'm doing some different things with the business, and it's incredibly exciting what's ahead. But more importantly, the client base is wonderful, and the success has been great. Pretty much all my loans have been approved for my clients, so it's great.
But that's beautiful because you've started this business. You've already got this thing on the side that you're getting to understand property. They need finance. You've come back to Australia, but you've gone into it. How old were you when you went and got your qualifications to be a mortgage broker?
So it would have been 2020. So 47, 48.
Oh, 47, 48. So you've left the security of full-time work at a senior level, and obviously the salary that comes with that, to go and start something brand new at 47, 48.
Yeah.
Oh,
and I
love
didn't give
that.
myself a plan B either. And I think that's probably the biggest key to success. It's very easy to just say, look, I'm just going to go back and work for someone. It's, it's kind of easier and whatnot. But I had no plan B. I had no idea. If this didn't work, I had no idea what I was going to do. And I think because there wasn't that, it was, well, then just get it done.
You have to make it succeed. There is no plan B. So this has to succeed. And I'm assuming your husband was very supportive during that time as well.
Yeah.
In earlier days, this is something that comes up quite a lot in conversation, even on the podcast. When you first started in mortgage broking and you weren't for a period of time bringing salary in or you weren't contributing financially to the household directly.
Yep.
How did that make you feel?
Yeah, I hated it. Yeah, absolutely hated it. I'm big on financial independence, and I coach a lot of my clients through that as well, whether they be first home buyers or leaving a relationship or going through some sort of a life-changing event that suddenly now, they knew nothing about finances or whatever, and now they find themselves in a position where they need to. I'm so big on that education and that empowerment and being financially independent, just in case something unforeseen does happen. And then I'd put myself in the most vulnerable position possible.
Just in case something unforeseen happens, like you decide to not go back and get a job and start your own business at 47, 48.
Exactly. So, I hated it. And I think that was probably another thing that really spurred me to make it work because, I like to have my own money to do things. I like to, take the family on a holiday or, do things with my horse or, I have to have financial independence. So, and that was taken away from me for 2 years, effectively.
Yeah.
And even then, by the third year, you're still not really where you want to be, and in a position where you sort of think, well, if something happened, I'm all right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a very uncomfortable feeling, and not one that I would desire to go back to.
No, but if somebody else was in the same shoes as you, again, it's a conversation I have a lot where people, especially as women are getting older and we're getting to that stage going, what I'm doing now, I cannot do this for the rest of my life. I've got this burning desire to do something else. But this is all I know. This is where my skill set's been. I can't just throw it all away and start something new. And like what you've just shared, have a period of time, whether that's, months, years, whatever it might be, where I'm not bringing in money. If somebody was in that situation now and they could still survive knowing that, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think you do need to have a reserve of cash behind you so that you don't feel, that vulnerable.
Mm.
But if you know financially that you can, for let's say 12 to 18 months, you can sustain where you're at,
Mm.
just do it, because
Yeah.
there is nothing more rewarding. And then,
Yeah.
by the time you get to the end of that journey, I know myself, like, financially, I would never have expected the success that has come with running this business. And it is a result of a lot of time and a lot of effort. And I live, breathe, sweat, bleed this business.
Yeah.
And even when I'm off, I'm not off.
Mm.
I go for a walk and I think about ideas for my business, or
Yeah.
things I can do for my clients, or a client, and I wonder if they've done this, or I wonder where they're at, or they've had a baby or whatever. So it's just a little bit Rain Man, but that's the passion I have for my business. And if you do have that passion and that burning desire in your chosen field, well, nothing will feel better than bringing that to life.
Yeah. Because what would have happened if you didn't do this, you didn't give it a go, and you had have come back to Australia, and after 6 months of not working and going nuts, gone and just worked for someone else when that bubble of what could be was just, simmering away. How would that have made you feel?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I
Yeah.
guess you don't know what you don't know, do
No.
you? But I mean, reflecting on it and knowing what I know now,
Yeah.
well, gosh, what a loss.
Oh, totally. And you probably would have done this yourself though. What would have been the worst that happened is that it didn't work out and you went back and got another job. That's the worst.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's a matter of just really backing yourself, and I think just having that underlying belief that you'll always be okay.
Mm.
You will always, everything will always work out.
Yeah.
And whether that be, as financial as you want it to or whatever, it doesn't matter. Everything will still work out. So
Yeah.
it really is, when you do, I guess, step into a platform like this and start building something on your own, you do have to back yourself, and
Yeah.
you do have to have a very, very strong why as to why you're doing it, and remind yourself on those tough days, why are you doing this? And it's got to be so compelling, because if you haven't got a why, you won't do it.
No. They're the days where you will give up and you will not stay in the saddle.
Yep.
Yeah, totally. And then, off the back of being relatively in, the early days of your business and taking up horse riding again, being reasonably new at it, not being the best, from where you were. I love that there's all this newness and all these new, wirings in your brain and connections in your brain that are all happening at the same time. And in your late 40s, like I just think that's even more beautiful, because again, the conversations I have with so many women are, but it's too late for me to go back and, take up horse riding again, or I go back and do dancing or play tennis, whatever the thing is that they wanted to do. It's like, it's too late. I'm too old, or time has passed me. No, it hasn't. And
No.
you're evidence of this,
Yeah.
both on a personal level and a professional level.
And it's very easy to live a life like that. I saw, I was watching a podcast not that long ago, and they were talking about strong addictions. And the topic that came out, that the strongest and most dangerous addiction you can have is comfort. And that means, you're not willing to, I guess, put yourself out there, try new things, or you make excuses for not doing things. And it would have been very, I did a number of times, especially the horse riding thing is like, I'm too old. Like, I don't bounce anymore. I can't afford to fall off. And and the same with running a business. I've done this for 25 years. Why would I try a new craft and build something from that? But the dopamine hits from giving it a go and having a successful outcome. There is nothing like it, and it is it is hard. It's not something that I guess you just sort of throw yourself into and say, right, I'm going to do it, and particularly as you get older. But if something's not working for you, you're not dead yet, right? So you've got to make the change, because you've got to make the most of every day. And there's no point in leading a life of mediocrity when you've got another 40 years ahead of you.
That's
So
it. Yeah,
yeah,
you've got 40 years ahead of you. And that's the argument that some, when I'm having these conversations, are like, but, I've done this for most of my life. I'm coming up towards my late 40s, early 50s, that's not, and I'm like, but you've got another 40 years or 50 years ahead of
yeah,
you. Is
yeah,
this what you want to keep doing? And
yeah.
it's interesting, actually. I took baseball up when I was 47, 48, right? And again, probably like you, getting back into horse riding. I played softball when I was younger. I was good at it when I was younger. And I had all those feelings of, I can't do this. But when I turned 52, I was looking at retiring only because I was getting injured all the time.
Right.
It broke my heart, but it meant I couldn't work out midweek and it just wasn't working. And I remember saying to my son at the time, it's not sitting with me retiring. And he said, oh my God, Mum, but you're 52. And I said, yeah, but compared to 92, I'm still really young.
Yeah.
And it was that moment where I thought, okay, if I'm making the decision, it's not because of my age. There's got to be another driving factor that would make me either, retire or continue to play. But it's not going to be my age.
No.
It's not going to be my age. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
No.
really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think maybe late 40s, early 50s. That's when you sort of go through those things. It's too late,
Yeah.
and it's just not.
No.
It's just not. I mean, by that time, the learnings that you have and the experiences that you have, and what you can bring to any table, whether it be in a leisure instance or a business sense, you've got so much more to throw out there and achieve potentially than what you would have 20 years ago.
Oh, totally. And how did it play out with you when you did start your own business? Again, going back to square one, you've never run your own business before. How did it feel to you from the perspective of what other people would think?
I never gave that a thought.
Yeah.
I was too busy competing with myself to worry about
Yeah.
what anybody else thought. Look, and I think it was also, speaking about the courage thing again, one of the game-changing things that came into being for me with the business was I did do a course on pitching to media. So because I thought, I'm going to learn how to pitch to the media and see if I can generate something from that. So I did a course on that, and I did pitch to a number of channels, and then I got a gig with Studio 10. That took courage. Live TV, and we were talking about financial literacy for women, because my business was very much founded on that and what I was seeing. And at the time, the topic of homelessness in women over 55 was quite prevalent. So they called me on to do an episode on that, a segment on that, and they didn't give me the question. Well, they gave me the questions 5 minutes before the actual recording.
Why?
So, well, they were meant to give them to me early that morning. They rang me up the day before, and they said, we'll get the questions to you in the morning, which means you can at least prepare. You're not going to have them in front of you, but you can at least prepare in your head what they're going to ask.
Yeah.
Anyway, they didn't. So this is my first TV experience. They give me the questions 10 minutes beforehand. That in itself threw me, because I thought, oh my gosh. So the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, boom. And I only knew the first question, so I had that ready to go. The first question they asked me was not that question.
So even what little preparation time you had, it didn't matter because that wasn't what they asked you. What question did they ask you? Can you remember?
Well, they had just increased rates again. And she said, this is our 8th rate increase in a row. How high are rates going to go? And I thought, what a stupid question. Like,
what is that?
Just have a crystal ball. So anyway, I had to go this long-winded way about the RBA being aggressive about, curbing inflation. And yes, it's hard to say how high they're going to go, but we're going to see a lot more pain before we see good stuff. And I don't know, I just sort of went into auto mode and it came across okay. But yeah, and then after that, I was quite happy with how it went. But then the news team came and grabbed me straight after and they said, that was great. Can you do the news tonight? So literally within 5 minutes of leaving that studio, they pulled me out and said, and so they recorded, that was pre-recorded, so that was easy.
Yeah.
So I did the 10 news that night as well. And then it just sort of led to this chain of media experiences. And, I've done a number of TV things now and print as well. So it comes quite easily to me. But live TV will never come easily. But it's just, again, one of those things, just have a crack.
And all of that off the back of doing a course on learning how to pitch to media.
Yeah.
What did you learn in that course that you think was for you something that you didn't know or you didn't do, you didn't behave in that way that was game changing?
I think I'd never done anything in the media. So I had no idea what I was getting into, but
maybe that ignorance was bliss.
Exactly. But I think it's knowing your craft. It doesn't, if you're going to pitch to them and you worry about the questions they ask and whatnot, the important thing that I have learned and, I still now take to any interview or anything like that is as long as you know your content and you know the message that you want to convey out there, it doesn't matter what they ask you, you can craft your answer around educating the public, but also getting what the message is that you want to convey out there. And I think that was the biggest learning for me.
Yeah. And I must say, I run a number of public speaking workshops. And one of the things that I do in there is when the participants, we're doing some role plays or getting them to come up and speak and they're like, oh, I want my notes. And it's like, do you know your content? Yeah. How well do you know it? Like the back of my hand. I'm like, great. You don't need your notes then.
Yeah.
And it's trusting yourself that at that moment, whatever they ask you, if you know your stuff, then the answer will come. And just, I think that's a really big thing that I've learned over the years with any kind of speaking, whether it's live, whether it's on something like this that's pre-recorded. But if you know your stuff, and trust that.
Yeah, know your stuff, have an opinion, and again, back yourself.
Yeah. Have you got any opinions at the moment that are, say, against the grain?
Well, I know a lot of economists are coming out and saying that there's potentially going to be 5 rate decreases between now and the end of the year.
Oh, I'd like that.
or maybe.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure that that's going to happen, but nothing really against the grain. Nothing that's sort of opposing, what the market. I have strong opinions on where the market's headed, and I think consumer confidence and what I'm seeing from a refinance perspective and all that sort of thing, I think I've got some fairly strong thoughts on that, but none of it's necessarily against the grain. It's just more sort of, what I'm seeing and, how we can turn that into a positive for anyone out there.
You also mentioned that you do a lot, even when you were recruiting, when you're in Singapore, you said that you were on like a project to recruit women, like an initiative around women. And even now you've talked about, literacy and financial literacy for women. What's one thing you think that women could do for themselves that would improve either their financial literacy or their understanding of money or finance or something like that?
You know what? I think it's talk to a mortgage broker and find out what your borrowing capacity is. Honestly, that experience is so enlightening in itself because you will learn if something happened tomorrow, my borrowing capacity is this. Is that the same as what the mortgage is on my current home? No. Okay. So I need to think about, I would need to downsize. It makes you think about your spending habits. It makes you think about what liabilities you have in the form of whether it be a personal loan, a car loan, a buy now, pay later. A good mortgage broker will sit down with you and say, right, this is your income. This is what your bank statements look like. This is what your expenses look like. These are your liabilities. And as a result, this is what your borrowing capacity looks like. And they will strategize to show you the full painting. And that knowledge in itself can be so incredibly empowering for any woman, whether they're in a happy relationship now, whether they're in one that they're feeling is a little bit flaky and they're, the writing's on the wall. If they're single and they're thinking of buying a first or a next or a property they haven't bought for a while, it's very comprehensive knowledge. And yes, you can do financial literacy courses and all that sort of thing. And I would encourage that as well. But from an application perspective, getting a mortgage broker to sit down with you and show you exactly what your scenario looks like, there can be a lot of aha moments triggered as a result of that experience.
And I'm assuming that that's even those that maybe they're not in the market, so to speak, but it's just the intel that it's providing about their actual situation versus their perceived situation.
It'll be a very enlightening experience.
Yeah. And the cost for them to do that?
Varies from broker to broker.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that though, just for those that are listening. And what about for those, what's your view on debt?
Good debt. Well, there's good debt and there's bad debt.
Yep.
So good debt is obviously something that's going to help you get further in life, whether that be, a HEX debt, obviously a mortgage, I guess a car loan. And then, there's bad debt such as credit cards, buy now, pay later. What a lot of people don't realize is that a $10,000 limit on your credit card can reduce your borrowing capacity by about $40,000 or $50,000. So I get a lot of clients say, "Oh, you've got a credit card, it's fine. I pay it off every month. That's fine." And that's great because that will bode well when the bank's assessing your character. But when it comes to capacity, they only care what your limit is because they will take into account if you get yourself into the worst case scenario. This is what your repayments are going to be on an interest rate of, let's say, 13 to 20% on a credit card, which is what it is. If you're not paying off that full balance, the compound interest that you're paying on that card is horrendous. And many people don't realize that. And they sort of think that by paying them $25 a month or whatever, the balance is staying the same. It's not. You're clocking up hundreds and hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars of interest that you don't need to because you've got the savings there. You're just, for whatever reason, not paying that balance off because you think of it, I guess, as a bit of a loan. So, credit cards are bad debt. Afterpay, if you can't afford it now, why buy it? And that's how the banks look at it. And I know that Afterpay and ZipPay, they can be great for managing cash flow. I don't mind the facilities, to be honest. I think they can be good for buying cash, for managing cash flow. But again, there can be some horrendous debt or fees associated with it if you don't meet your obligations. The banks hate them. They will look at it purely in that lens of, well, you're buying things that you can't afford now, so why have the facility? So there's some debt is good, some debt not so good.
Yeah. No, I've had this question a couple of times lately, just in my personal circle, and I just thought, I'd love to get your opinion on that. So what's the next thing that you've got to really reach in and find some courage for in any area of your life, personal or professional?
So I don't know if it's courage, but I've had to dig deep to let go of the business. So as I said, I have mentioned that I've just hired someone, which means now, and it has taken a bit of courage, I guess, to let go and have faith in somebody else to take my brand on the way that I would. But if I don't, I'm going to keep doing menial tasks that are not worth my hourly rate and, find myself in the weeds for longer than I need to. So I probably should have done this 12 months ago, but I wasn't ready to. But now that I have, I'm grateful, very grateful that I have, because now I can see how much more value add I can bring for my clients. So that has taken a little bit of courage. And then I think where I now want to take it, it's going to take a bit of courage to now get out to, I guess, spread the net a bit further when it comes to referral partners and building relationships and networks and, I guess, business development. So that's something that never really comes that easy to me. I'm not one of those people that's really, really salesy because I don't like that myself. And I sort of go with the attitude, well, nobody else likes it, whereas some people do like it. So you've just got to throw it out there and see what happens.
Absolutely. And also, if you've got someone helping you now, then that'll give you some capacity in order to get out there and do this and stretch some of those little zones of comfort, which I like what you say, one of the worst addictions is to comfort, what you were mentioning earlier. I think that is such a beautiful thing to share and to wind up this podcast on. But, on the other side of comfort is that beautiful, delicious growth and opportunity and thinking about things that, don't have to become a one day or a dream or a wish. They can actually happen now.
No,
and
that's right.
What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah. And the things that make you, one thing I have definitely learned is the things that make you the most uncomfortable are the things that end up the most rewarding and value add.
Oh, completely. Now, obviously, I'll put all your details in the show notes. But for those who just want to follow along, and I must say, Adele's socials are so helpful for anyone. Like, I love it. I mean, this is part of the reason why, I mean, I knew you anyway, but part of the reason why I really was interested in engaging you to help my husband and I, because even the way you show up on social media, it's lovely and it's caring, but it gives you the content that you need at the same time. So, where do you hang out most online?
Yeah, thank you. So, a big part of what I do, a lot of what I do is education.
Yeah.
Yes, I write home loans, but I also like to let people know what's available to them in the market and how it might apply to them, and just educate, because I think there's a big gap in the market for the general public to actually understand what's going on and why, and how it might help them. So my Instagram handle is Ozprop Home Loans, and you can also find me on Facebook at Australian Property Home Loans, and I'm on LinkedIn as Adele Andrews.
Beautiful. And I will put all those details in the show notes. One last question, Benjamin and you, what next? Benjamin's the
So,
horse.
so okay, so we want to talk about courage. So there's an elite event at the Royal Show each year for women called the Gary Owen, and it's kind of the country's biggest class for Australian equestrians. And as a little girl, I always dreamed of doing the Gary Owen, and I thought, but never really had a horse that was good enough to do it. And it takes specific gear and specific. It's a very specific event. And anyway, I've decided I'm going to do it this year on Ben. So I only decided on the weekend that this is the year, because I thought, well, if I don't do it this year, I'll never do it. So that has taken a lot of courage to make it happen. And I probably will be the oldest competitor in there, but I'm going to do it.
Look, and you know what? Whether you win it or not, the fact that you've participated and it was a dream you had since you're a little girl,
Yeah.
you get to have that moment of being a part of this, which is, reliving that dream or bringing that dream to life that, little Adele had. That is absolutely beautiful. So, Adele, stick in that saddle. You've got this. We all want to know what happens with you and Benjamin. And thank you for sharing. I've absolutely loved it. Could keep going forever, but just thank you for being a part of it, because you are one courageous woman.
And thanks, Kim. I've loved it.